Blog Talk Radio.
Welcome.
There's a time when the operation of the machine becomes so odious, makes you so sick at heart that you can't take part. You can't even passively take part. And you've got to put your bodies upon the gears and upon the wheels, upon the levers, upon all the apparatus, and you've got to make it stop. And you've got to indicate to the people who run it, to the people who own it, that unless you're free, the machine will be prevented from working at all. I want the truth. You can't handle the truth.
As long as the Matrix exists, the human race will never be free.
Start somewhere. It has to start sometime. What better place than here? What better time than now?
Terrorists! Terrorize this.
I know you're out there. I can feel you now. I know that you're afraid. You're afraid of us. You're afraid of change. I don't know the future. I didn't come here to tell you how this is going to end. I came here to tell you how it's going to begin. I'm going to hang up this phone, and then I'm going to show these people what you don't want them to see. I'm going to show them a world without you. A world without rules and controls, without borders or boundaries. A world where anything is possible. Where we go from there is a choice I leave to you.
Mr. Gunnarsson, well, I spoke to you when this crisis first began, and when we had that interview, you said to me that Fukushima would become a Chernobyl on steroids. Do you still stand by that?
Well, when we spoke, you'll recall that the Japanese were saying it was less than 3 Mile Island, and in the last 2 weeks they've finally admitted it was as bad as Chernobyl. And then a week ago, they upped their radiation exposure, so it's essentially identical to Chernobyl, and it hasn't stopped. 6-7 weeks into it, Chernobyl was not emitting any more gases and not emitting any more liquids, and Fukushima still is. So we're not out of the woods yet on Fukushima. Yes, I stick by what I said 6 weeks ago.
Well, if the situation is as critical as you say, why is it that the Japanese authorities are telling us that everything is indeed under control and getting better?
I've been frustrated by the Japanese authorities, both the electric company and the national authorities. Since this began, they have consistently underestimated the magnitude of the problem. I think, with 50 reactors and fears of power shortages and associations with the nuclear industry, that combination makes them want to see the absolute best in a situation, when in fact it's much worse than they're willing to admit.
Some would say they were just trying to keep the situation calm and not to scaremonger the population.
Yeah, I think they have tried to keep it calm, but it's one thing to keep it calm. It's another to tell the facts as they really are. And I don't believe that TEPCO did. I think they've had information in their possession that should have caused an evacuation sooner, and they certainly should have gotten the younger people and the pregnant women out much sooner than they did. So keeping calm is nice, but ignoring the facts in front of you is poor management.
Interesting you talk about pregnant women and children. Indeed, we know that the Japanese government has a new, much higher acceptable radiation threshold for children. I see, though, that the level they've chosen is what other countries deem only safe for adults working at nuclear plants. Are they being reckless in some ways, taking a risk with young lives here?
I think it's inappropriate. I think it's a gross miscarriage of what we know to be the science of radiation. What happens is that kids and pregnant mothers, their cells are dividing very, very fast. much faster than an adult male. And by allowing the kids to receive what an adult male might receive as a legal limit, in fact, the risk of cancer to a kid is between 10 and 100 times higher for the same exposure to an adult.
Let's look at the future now. Japan has announced a plan to cover the reactors in a protective shield to stop all radiation leaks. Is that going to work?
I don't think so. I think the problem at Fukushima is that a lot of the radiation is leaking down into the groundwater. It's obviously in the ocean. It's been detected in fish 40 kilometers away. And the interesting thing this weekend is that they detected radiation in the foundations of Fukushima 5 and 6. And they're about a kilometer to the north, a half a kilometer at least to the north. So clearly the radiation is already seeping into the groundwater. So putting a cap on top won't solve the downward migration of that radiation at all.
I just want to end this very quickly, running out of time. Briefly, given your experience in the nuclear industry, you've worked in the nuclear industry for a long time, but now many saying, look at the dangers it poses. Surely this is the end of nuclear energy. Alternative energy sources must be now found. Isn't that the end of your profession in some ways?
Yes, I think that this is the bookend. Chernobyl or 3 Mile Island was the one bookend on the nuclear era. That Fukushima will bookend the other end of the nuclear era, and people will begin to realize, perhaps not immediately, but begin to realize that we're going down a path where the costs are so astronomically high, and so are the financial costs to build, that there's got to be a better way.
Very interesting to hear what you have to say, particularly from somebody who's been working in the nuclear industry for so long. Arnold Gunderson, Energy Advisor at Fairwinds Associates, thanks for joining us live there in Vermont.
Thanks for having me.
Pleasure.
Yes, everybody, the Japanese, American, and Canadian governments just didn't want to scaremonger the public. That's why they're covering up all the atrocities coming out of Fukushima. It's all for us, everybody, as usual. Anyways, let's get on with this program. Greetings, free thinkers, revolutionaries, anti-globalists, and awakening sheeple. It is Monday, December 5th, 2011. You've found yourselves in full rad gear, dosing up on potassium iodide here on the front lines in this war on our humanity. I am your host, Darren Stone, broadcasting to you live from FEMA Region 1. Tonight's call-in number is 917-889-3064. I'm very excited about my guest tonight. My guest is Christina Consolo. She's a smarty pants, everybody, just to let you know. Christina is a former clinical researcher. She's worked on studies for the National Institutes of Health, University of Wisconsin, USC, Keck School of Medicine, former educator in retinal research and imaging, taught for Joint Commission and Allied Health and Duke University, among other stuff. And when she was out on medical leave, she started researching Fukushima because she was at one time, we'll find out if she still is, pro-nuclear energy, and she has a lot of friends in the industry. She started hearing about the cover-ups, I shouldn't say cover-ups, I should say she started noticing a lack of official information being released to the public, and I'm assuming that kind of perked her interest. That being said, we will find out what she thinks now. She has a lot of information on this subject. But before we get to Christina, let me just do the normal plugs here. Just a quick plug. The Front's website, frontradio.net, we have a new news feed on the website. It is front and center on the homepage. It is a news feed from a website called Shit Hit the Fan School. Very, very interesting stuff for all you survivalists and preppers out there. It is a first-hand account on the collapse of a society. Also, just a little plug for the Front's T-shirts. They are in and being distributed as we speak. We've sold a bunch of them already. So if you want to donate to the show and keep it on the air and support the truth, $20 donation gets you a shirt. Also, if you're wound up after tonight's broadcast, as I'm sure you will be, and you're up till about 10 p.m. Eastern Time, head on over to the Orion Talk Radio Network and check out the What the F show at 10 p.m. with my friend Jules and company. All right. I'm going to bring Christina on board now. She is also, for you Facebookers, she is Rad Chick on Facebook, so please check out her Facebook page, and she is Itchy Cax4 on YouTube. I'll be posting links to Christina's pages after the program. They are in the show description for those of you listening on Blog Talk Radio. So Christina's on the line. Let me get to her right now. Hey, Christina, are you there?
Hi, Darren.
Hey, how's it going?
Good. Thank you so much for what you're doing. We need more people like you talking about real stuff.
Well, thank you. I have a big mouth. I can't shut it when it comes to exposing the lies and the bull that we are fed. I call this show a war on our humanity, and I really think that's what it is. And I don't think anything highlights that more than the disaster at Fukushima. So I heard you on the Charlie McGrath show, and you were great. And I've been looking at all your stuff on Facebook for a while. Just joined your page on YouTube, and you have a lot of great info. So, I have to admit to you, Christina, I'm nervous. Okay, I'm nervous because I don't really think I want to hear all the things you have to say. But I've never been one to bury my head in the sand, and I don't think anybody that wants the truth is going to bury their head in the sand. I look at this like everything else. If you're dealing with a fatal disease, what are you going to do? You're going to just wither away and die, or you're going to try to fight it? I would be one to try to fight it. So I guess we'll try to do that with this situation. So first of all, I gave a little. I don't know if you heard the intro when I talked about your background a little bit, but you got into this on a medical leave, and you were pro-nuclear energy at one point. I don't know if you still are, and you have friends in the industry, and this kind of piqued your interest when you were aware of the lack of information coming out.
Well, I knew that those reactors contain the power of the sun, and it is never meant to get outside. I do have friends in the industry. I actually helped a friend of mine who's a physicist who now works at Fermi 2 get it through his security check. I had to be interviewed by Fermi 2 for about an hour to help him pass his security clearance. This was about 15 years ago, and I have been trying to contact this guy ever since, calling him, and on Facebook. He will not return my calls because he knows what I'm up to. And then I would imagine that most of the people in the industry are under some kind of,
gag order.
Gag order, sure.
Yeah, you want to keep your job, you're going to keep your mouth shut. How do you feel about that, though? Don't you? I mean, my feeling about it is, as with most things, I would give up my job if it meant exposing the truth to this. I mean, this is so horrific. My paycheck isn't really going to matter in the long run.
Right, and I really don't know what all these industry people are worried about. It's in terms of job security. We have spent fuel all over the place that will be active for hundreds of thousands of years, and it needs to be dealt with. And everything needs to be, dry cast and monitored. I mean, their jobs are secure. That stuff's going to keep them busy forever. But the industry definitely, generates quite a bit of money, and our politicians collect quite a bit of that too when they're campaigning. Even our governor of Michigan, out of his top 5 contributors in his last campaign, 2 of them were healthcare related, and 2 of them were chemical or nuke related. Dow Chemical was a big supporter of Governor Snyder, and so was DT Energy, who runs some of the nuke plants in our state. And and then he has also contributors from Blue Cross Blue Shield and the University of Michigan Healthcare. So they kind of contradict each other when you start realizing what these chemical companies and nuclear companies are doing to the population of these states. And you can look at rainfall maps, what they call a rain shadow around the plants, and the amount of cancer and autism in children are substantially higher in areas where it rains out around these plants, because as part of their normal operating procedures, they vent to the air all the time. And some of them even vent occasionally have to dump radioactive water. And that's why they're always placed around lakes and rivers for cooling reasons if there is some kind of accident. And
so that would be the reason for the placement of Fukushima on the coast,
right,
as well as the plants up and down the East Coast.
If you look at a map of Japan, too, they have, I think, 55 plants, and they're all located on the coast.
You know, it's amazing, don't you think, Christina, that the big brains that plan these plants and their locations and construction would throw them up where they're most susceptible to tsunamis and earthquakes. And you know, I have to be honest. I believe that most things are a conspiracy against the human population at this point. After I've done all my research and been doing this for 10 years, and to me, it appears as though we've been set up big time. I think it goes beyond greed myself, you know, as far as making money off of the nuclear energy industry. I think it goes far beyond that, but maybe we'll get into that a little bit later. So tell me, what, as you're looking at Fukushima unfold, tell me what you're thinking. Tell me about the process you went through personally.
Well, personally, I have 4 daughters, and my kids are older. The youngest is 16, the oldest is 25. And when Fukushima first happened, my interest was really in finding out how bad these releases were going to be, how far-reaching they would be, and what that might do potentially to their fertility. Because I've raised them all to believe that one day they would have families of their own, and there was a possibility in my mind that this may not happen. They may not be able to have children, or it may be too risky in terms of mutation and disease, because fetuses have extraordinary cell division that's going on, as well as babies under 12 months, and children are 10 to 20 times more susceptible to the effects of radiation than adults. But what I'm thinking now, from everything that I know, is they're going to be lucky if that's the only way that this affects them. And it's really not even kids in that age group. Teenagers and young adults are going to be hit by this the least. It's going to be little kids, babies, the unborn, sick people, the elderly, anyone who has compromised immune systems. They're the ones who are going to feel these effects the quickest.
Right. Now
that's
it's been about 10 months since Fukushima now, almost 10 months. And do you foresee a infant mortality rate increasing? Do you foresee birth defects like we saw coming out of Chernobyl happening in Japan?
It's already happening, and in fact, there's 3 death rates that have gone up between 40 and 43% since April, and one classification is maternal deaths. That's where the mother and the baby dies during pregnancy.
And Christina, where are these numbers coming from? Are they coming from the United States and Japan?
These numbers are actually coming from the CDC and from researchers in the field that are starting to publish data. But, it takes months and sometimes years to get this data published, because there's a peer review process that has to happen. Once a researcher submits their data, it goes to a panel of people, and I used to sit on one of those panels and have to review these papers. And sometimes when we got something in, no matter how newsworthy it was, if you've got 10 papers that are ready to go the next publishing cycle, that data may not get published for a year or a year and a half. So there's been researchers that have been presenting at conferences, sharing their data, and eventually it will get published, and very slowly, these medical groups will start waking up to this too. But by that time, there's already been so much significant exposure, and I'm getting emails from people all over the country saying, that my kid got a sunburn after a rainstorm in the Pacific Northwest. I have a rash that won't go away. I keep going to the doctor. They don't know what it's from, or I've had diarrhea for months, or my kids and I are getting nosebleeds. there's all kinds of symptoms, and if you start looking at just this group of symptoms, they're doing maps for it in Japan. You can actually look up the nosebleed map. You can look up the diarrhea map. Everything is a hot spot around Fukushima.
And these are all symptoms of radiation poisoning.
Yeah, the symptoms of radiation exposure are hair loss, nosebleeds, diarrhea, gastrointestinal upset, of course, bleeding from your colon or anything like that, difficulty breathing, a feeling like your throat is closing, or persistent sore throat, strange bruises that you may develop for no reason, bleeding gums. And there's others too. If you get to a point though where you're vomiting from it, then you've got some significant exposure problems. And our doctors haven't been trained in this because this is something that seemed to go out of style after the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty in the 60s and when the Soviet Union fell, because the danger of us being bombed with a nuke went away. So they don't even really teach this stuff, doctors, anymore in medical school, because it wasn't thought this would ever be something we're dealing, with.
Right.
No one could foresee a nuke plant disaster of this magnitude. And when you have 6 reactors so close together, Chernobyl could be managed somewhat because they only had 1 reactor that they were dealing with, and they dealt with it quickly. I've heard that it had anywhere from 400 to 600,000 people that worked on that site. In 2 weeks, they managed to not only encase it in concrete, but they dug underneath the plant and backfilled a 6-foot-tall lane of concrete and boron to keep the corium from getting down into the groundwater, because they knew that would be bad.
Right, and that's what amazes me about Fukushima. You hear all these experts, quote-unquote experts, saying things like, well, I don't think they had a plan, and they're trying all these ridiculous things like sending in these robots that just break down and covering it with a tent and throwing seawater on it. I mean, why not just use Chernobyl as this is what you do and let's do this?
Yeah. Originally, they wanted to save the plant. They thought that they could clean it up and restart all those
Do you
reactors.
honestly believe that, though? I don't believe that one bit. I mean, I'm going to tell you, when I did my first program, I believe it was that happened on a Friday, right? The earthquake.
I don't recall what day it happened.
I think
I think so.
It was a Friday, and I did my next show on Monday. And when I did that show, I mean, I am no nuclear expert at all, not even close. Okay, it's something I'm learning about and getting scared as I do. But I said on my show that this is going to make Japan, the northern Japan at the very least, a wasteland. And I actually had somebody say that I was over-exaggerating. I had a guy call in who was he thought he was kind of a smarty pants too with his nuclear energy knowledge, and he said, "Oh, you're kind of over-exaggerating." Well, it looks like I was actually under-exaggerating.
Right.
So
I had the same kind of reaction. I was posting on Huffington Post, nobody should be having kids right now. I mean, if you plan on having children, wait until we know what the situation is, because there's such a high propensity to fetal abnormalities and death. And, people wrote back to me, well, definitely you shouldn't be having kids anymore.
You can't shake the sheeple awake sometimes. All right, let's do this. All right. I mean, I've heard a lot of people talk about this, and I want you and I to be able to allow the listeners to relate to what's going on here. So, the technical stuff is great for people that want to look into it, but let's kind of break it down. And as we have the fallout coming across the Pacific into the United States, because I don't have a lot of listeners in Japan. I don't really have a lot of listeners in the United States either, but I have a few. So when it comes over to the United States, what's happening? What areas are being affected? As far as you know, what is the effects, and what are they being affected by? I know that's a lot.
Well, the way the Earth turns, we have a jet stream. We actually have 2 of them in each hemisphere. One travels around the Arctic Circle in the northern hemisphere. The other hits anywhere from Alaska to Mexico. It's in a constant rate of flux depending on the other weather patterns that are going on. And so the areas where this jet stream is hitting are carrying the highest level of radionuclides because the jet stream crosses right over Japan before it goes across the Pacific. And I've got some numbers just from the first week after Fukushima happened. The EPA graphs, which have been online forever, and they're supposed to be there so that we can monitor fallout that may come from occasional detonations, like Korea did one, I think in 2006, or did two of them. You know, they're not supposed to, but they did. Mm-hmm. We've got fallout from all the bomb testing that we've done here, and from other sources, you know, plants in Russia and in France. You know,
you're referring to the over 800 nuclear detonations our government has conducted out in the West, right?
I've heard it's even more than that. I heard the number is more like 1,500.
Yeah, I'm shooting low just to cover my butt, really, but I figured 800 sounded horrific enough. So I know it's probably higher, but yeah, everybody, that's our government bombing us into oblivion. Just so you know.
Yeah,
okay.
These graphs are supposed to monitor that, and they hadn't been kept up the way they should in terms of maintenance. But the first week, these were some of the numbers that came in, and these are all in comparison to the year prior, to 2010.
Okay.
All 129 cities on the graph from 311 to 331, the average beta levels were up 5%, but these are a couple of cities that really got hit, and it was because of where the jet stream was and because of the rain that occurred during those 2 weeks. Tucson was 18.2% times higher than what the graphs read on average. Eureka, California was 53 times higher.
Wow.
San Diego was 11 times higher. Honolulu was 24 times higher. Salt Lake City was 17 times higher. And then the other graphs that had high between 5 and 16 times were Los Angeles, Portland, Phoenix, Riverside, Orlando, Florida, Hilo, Las Vegas, San Francisco, Omaha, Sacramento, Jacksonville, Florida, and Idaho Falls, Idaho. And the week that at the end of this term of data, the EPA pulled the graph from online. They wouldn't let anyone look at them and said that the levels were fine and we don't need to monitor this. And people were like, wait a second, these graphs are always supposed to be there.
Right.
Something's going on. And they kept those graphs offline until June. When they brought them back on in June, they all seemed to be reading lower than what they were reading in 2010. It doesn't make any sense.
Well, unless you're hiding the truth.
I've got the graph of Sacramento, and you can see what the levels were before Fukushima and how far that graph was turned down afterward. And what I found out since then, too, is the woman who's in charge of these graphs used to work for George Bush Sr. She was actually a director in, I want to say, Department of Defense, but I'm not positive. Her name is Patricia Bradshaw. And she gets paid, she was awarded the contract to manage these graphs. She gets paid $238,000 a year just for taking on this job. That doesn't include any maintenance that she bills for, any travel expenses that she incurs.
So she's a reptilian. So she's a reptilian globalist suck up, is what you're trying to say, right? Well, it's true.
That's a possibility.
Hey, look. I don't know how human beings can allow other human beings to go through the atrocities that they do. I'm referring to governments and I just I'm smart enough to know that I know nothing, and so I don't dismiss anything, because I don't know how other human beings could allow their home, their planet, to be destroyed like this. That's why I say it goes way beyond greed. And when I throw in words like reptilian, hey, they could be. I mean, really, is this woman that you're referring to? She's actually going to allow people's children, their babies, people she knows, to all be exposed to these to this fallout and come down with horrific radiation poison related diseases, all for $250,000 a year, $230,000 a year, and some perks. I mean, to me, I walked out of a job selling jewelry because I couldn't stand the thought of the kids over in the diamond mines in Africa, getting worked to death and slaughtered. And that was a six-figure job I had coming my way, and I just said, this is stupid. I'm not doing it, and I walked out. I don't understand how people can just do this for the money, and that's why I use those terms. I just wanted to explain that. But
sick people are easier to control, for one thing, and the other thing is it boosts our healthcare industry. I mean, in Michigan, the healthcare industry is now the largest private sector employer. Well, it used to be the auto industry, but it's not anymore. I don't know how that compares to other states, but I mean, this is really going to boost their business.
Well, look, the CDC, Big Pharma, they had their goal was to find a way to medicate healthy people. So they've done that through psychotropics, and now they'll just make sure everybody's sick. And there you go, booming industry. But again, I personally think it goes beyond the money thing. The money thing is easy to control the dumbed down sheeple that just want to go after the big paycheck. Money's the drug to control these people. But when you actually produce and make the money and allow these things to happen, that's why I think it goes deeper.
Mm-hmm.
But
the information it is very upsetting. The effects of exposure are very upsetting, and it's going to become more so because if these graphs keep going higher. For a while, after May, it seemed like things might be getting under control from the data that we do have, and we have people all over the country that are monitoring this with their own Geiger counters too and posting it on forums. It seemed like things were leveling off, but something happened in September, and there's from people watching the TEPCO cameras, there were large steam releases that were occurring around, especially reactor 3 and 4. And it seems like there may have been some groundwater contact that was made. And when that happens, these blobs of corium that have leaked out of the reactors, they each weigh about 150 tons. And
so that's a blob of nuclear stuff.
Right. And
165 tons. Okay.
And when it's 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit. And when it hits cold water, it reacts. It causes uranium to react. And once uranium gets started, it starts creating more uranium. It keeps splitting and splitting and splitting into more uranium, which catches more of this blob into an event called criticality. And when it starts releasing, some of the isotopes actually calm the blob down. So you see these spikes, and then they go down, and then they spike, and they go down, and it's called a feast or famine cycle. Something definitely started happening in September, and the graphs started going up here, and they've been consistently getting higher and higher. And I started doing forecasts to predict where this stuff was going to be falling out based on what's going on the cameras at TEPCO. The timing of it takes about a day and a half to hit Hawaii, about 2 days to reach Alaska, again, depending on where the jet stream is flowing at that time, which you can find maps of that all over online from weather sites, and based on where the highest rainfall would be occurring. And there was one particular spike in North Carolina that was actually off the top of the graph, and that's when I said, I got to start doing something. There's ways that we can mitigate this. If the news was just all bad and there was no way to get around it, I probably wouldn't even be talking to people about this. Mm-hmm. Let everybody live their life. But the thing is, there's ways that we can mitigate this. There's many, many cheap, simple ways, things that people can do to reduce their exposure. And a big one is staying out of the rain or the snow. And the two biggest ways that radiation gets into the body is through our water supply and through our dairy. Mm-hmm. And the reason for the dairy is because the higher areas, like around the Cascades and in California, the higher the elevation in the area, the higher the radiation fallout. So the fallout occurs in these mountains, and then the melt, the water comes down and irrigates all of our crops and our cattle.
Right.
You can avoid a lot of that by reducing the amount of dairy, drinking a higher fat content milk if you still drink milk. We went from drinking 1 gallon a day between the three of us to drinking about a gallon a week.
Oh, I stopped drinking.
The fat,
I stopped drinking milk I stopped drinking milk when I learned about all the bovine hormones and all the disgusting stuff in milk. So I haven't been drinking milk for a while. I don't recommend anybody drink milk unless you know exactly where it's coming from.
Yeah, probably a good move there. But right now, the only cattle that could be considered safe are ones that are indoors and are being fed hay that's growing indoors and water that's coming from a groundwater or an underground well. Because as this stuff seeps into the ground, clay actually binds to the radioactive particles and removes it. So any underground water supplies, underground wells are actually still probably the safest.
Right.
Or you can buy water at your grocery store. It's called reverse osmosis.
Mm-hmm.
It's filtered through a bunch of different processes, and that removes all the radiation. We use that water now for everything, making coffee. That's what I give my pets. We even use it in brushing our teeth.
Do you have a well, or do you have a city water?
No, I have city water.
All right. Now, see, I would assume that people that have town or city water, especially if there's a water treatment plant with those huge vats exposed to the air, that might be an issue.
Right. And in fact, I have a friend on Facebook who lives in Ohio, and he just sent me a letter that he got from his water company in Ohio stating that they cannot be responsible for radiation in the water. And they were just letting people know that.
By the way, everybody, just throwing it out there. We can't be responsible for radiation in your water. Just the timing is not a coincidence. Just a separate event. Just letting you guys know.
Right, but if you buy this reverse osmosis, you can actually get a system for your house. They're like $200 that all your water goes through, and that's what a lot of people in Tokyo are buying. It fits under your sink in your kitchen. But if you buy it at the grocery store, instead of going in there to get milk now, go in there and get your water. It's 39 cents a gallon.
Right.
I mean, who can't afford that? And then, there's other things you can use baking powder, like in your laundry. You can use it after, if you get caught in the rain and you get soaked, you put some in your kids' bath. Baking soda is an amazing tool to have. It's actually what the military uses to clean contaminated soil.
It is. It's also
baking soda binds to the particles, and
it's a cancer preventative as well. Baking soda. And I just wanted to back up a little bit. You mentioned clay in the earth for your wells, and it will decontaminate the radioactive water. Just for the listeners out there, you guys, bentonite clay, you can ingest it, and that might be a good thing to do. It's pretty cheap. I do it. I try to do it every other day, a tablespoon of bentonite clay to help pull out any metals or isotopes or anything else I'm exposed to. I mean, do it for the chemtrails if you don't think the radiation is a big deal, but trust me, it is. Spirulina, chlorella, potassium iodide for your thyroid, calcium for your bones, to protect bones from strontium and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, sorry, Christina.
Just a word about the chlorina.
Mm-hmm.
I can never say that word right. The people that lived around Hiroshima that ate miso soup every day, and miso is like a soy-based soup. I make it with vegetable stock, but you can put they put tofu in it and sometimes mushrooms and green onions and seaweed. And people that ate that every day had a lower incidence of cancer than the rest of the country. And these were people that lived around Hiroshima. And seaweed is a really great source for anti-cancer, but don't buy it from Japan.
Right.
You can buy it from there's Norway kelp. You can buy, and you have to really start paying attention to labels and things too if you buy Asian food ever.
Yeah.
I don't recommend anybody eat sushi anymore for sure. In fact, now they're finding radiation in tuna, and tuna is a deep water fish, and one of the species that they thought would be affected the least because of it's a deep water fish, but the radiation that's getting into the ocean from Fukushima is actually sinking to the bottom, so it's infecting everything. And seafood isn't safe any longer, and it hasn't been for a while. And if you do have it, you should really try to get the Atlantic salmon and things like that, or something from the fish farms if you got to have it.
Yes, I was actually doing some produce shopping last week, and all the apples that I could find were from Washington, and I didn't want that. So there was a guy doing the produce thing in the grocery store, and I said, "Hey, man, do you have any apples that are not grown on the West Coast?" And he's kind of looking at me, like these apples aren't good enough for me. He's looking at me, and he's like, "Yeah, we have these. They're growing over here." I forget where he said, and I can't remember what kind of apples they were, but they're on the East Coast. And I said, "Thank you." And he goes, "Why do you care?" Well, I said, because it's fallout from Fukushima. All these things are going to be tainted with radiation. He goes, "Oh, no, the FDA they watch all that stuff." And I put my hand on his shoulder and I said, "Buddy, no, they don't. No, they don't.
No, they're not."
I said, "Just do your own research."
I just had the same conversation with the manager of my grocery store, and I was in there buying produce, and I stopped him and I said, I was just curious if you guys are doing any testing. And he said that, "Oh, yeah, we're testing at our distribution center everything that isn't being imported." And I said, "Yeah, but what about the stuff that's being grown here, especially the stuff in California? Are you guys testing that?" And he's like, "No." And so I talked to him. We had about a 10 or 15-minute conversation. And the next time I went into the store, he said they're going to be getting a Geiger counter, and they're going to be checking all of their produce, and they're going to be advertising this because they're going to be probably the first grocery store in Michigan, or maybe even in the country, that's doing this.
That's excellent.
So that may help. And he was, very open to that, and he has young kids, so he was very interested in what I was telling him. But I brought some lettuce back from there, and I actually that night I told him I was thinking about coming into the store with my Geiger counter, and he's like, "Don't do that." So I checked everything when I got it home, and I've got an old Geiger counter. It still needs to have the tubes checked inside, but it is reading. And when I stuck it in the bag of lettuce, it went all the way to the end of the scale.
Oh my God!
And
where was the lettuce from? Where was the lettuce from?
From California.
How long ago was it?
So I actually about a week ago.
Wow. Okay.
So I soaked the lettuce in a mixture of baking soda and water, just like a half a cup with 3 big heads of romaine. Let it sit in there for about 20, 30 minutes, took it out, checked it again, no readings. Stuck the probe back in the bag that it came out of, and it went to the end of the scale again. So I told him that when I went in the next time, too, and I said, "You really got to watch the lettuce. Lettuce has a lot of water uptake."
Right.
And if you look at pictures right now, the lettuce that's growing in Japan, they're huge. And I had a picture that I'll probably put online with the show of this woman holding up this gigantic thing of kale, and they love it. They're showing off their potatoes. Their sweet potatoes are like the size of medicine balls.
I saw
right now.
you.
Radiation
I saw that picture you posted
makes
about
vegetables grow like crazy. I mean, that used to be cool when you found that kind of stuff at a store, or you had something like that growing in your garden. If you see stuff like that now, take a picture of it and send it to me, because I'm trying to compile as much of these pictures to send in to researchers so they can put it with their slideshows. They can document where this kind of thing is occurring.
Well,
and
I mean, don't you find it amazing that the citizens of Japan are showing off their mutated vegetables, like they're proud of it? I mean, I guess this is the effects of the government putting lithium in the water in Japan. I mean, there you go, where everybody's happy. Hey, we're good with it, I mean,
yeah.
I have a question, and I'm going to back up just a little bit. When you mentioned the the levels rising 58% in this city and 32% in this city. What does that mean for the people living there? What does a 53% or 53 times elevation? What does that mean for the people living there? Should they be taking? And I know everybody should be, because no radiation exposure is good because it's compounding. What should they be doing?
Well, those graphs that I shared the numbers with you, those are air graphs. So after these levels were measured in the air and they rained out, then the next time, then they're in the water supply. At the very least, people should be doing the filtered water thing, and you can even get like a Brita pitcher or something that hooks onto your sink with activated carbon. That filters out some of it, but it's not as good as the reverse osmosis. And mitigation is easy. Dealing with a sickness is not, but trying to avoid it is basically just healthier living, doing things to boost your immune system, like getting enough sleep, lessening your amount of stress.
Which we all should be doing anyways.
Which we all should be doing anyway. And as I said on Charlie's show, I don't know if you heard this, but if this turned out to be some kind of huge hoax and all these numbers are wrong and all these researchers are wrong, then if people made these changes in their life to mitigate RADS, they would be, mortality rates should go down significantly, but they're not. In fact, across the country, especially in Idaho and Montana and Utah and Colorado, the mortality rates have gone up 10% in the general population. This isn't counting the babies and miscarriages and maternal deaths. This is just general population. It's gone up 5% across the entire country, but it's broken down by region, and you can look up the CDC table online and the current table that they have is from the end of March through the beginning of September, and that's the numbers that they've been getting. But, if people did these things, they'd have a better quality of life. They'd be healthier. I tell my friends, search out the top 10 anti-cancer foods, the top 10 foods that reduce free radicals, because that's what, damages your cells. And your cells have an amazing ability to repair a lot of this damage, even if you're exposed, but not if you're eating junk. If you're eating fast food, you're eating processed food, you're not getting the amount of nutrition that you need to keep your cells healthy.
No, most people don't understand that the body is regenerative. It does heal itself if you give it the tools to do so.
Right.
I just want to make sure that that you guys listening out there, when you hear things about people talking about, say, the Occupy movements and why are those people in the streets, and they're talking about banking and blah, 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 and, there's a multitude of reasons why all human beings should be rallying against the powers that be right now. If it's not obvious to everybody that they definitely do not have your best interest in mind. In fact, I would say it's 180 degrees from your best interest. If we continue to allow these people to take us down this road, just look what's happening. Look at this. We're talking about food. We have cesium-137 being detected in strawberries and mushrooms, and strontium found in the milk, like you're talking about. And we are being poisoned to death with radiation, with chemtrailing, with genetically modified foods, with poison vaccine, with everything. We're being attacked on multiple fronts, pardon the pun, but we are, and there's a multitude of reasons for people to get angry and pissed off, and this stuff is just going to continue. And if we don't do something, if you don't start exposing the truth, and I just wanted to, sorry, I'm going off a little tangent, but I appreciate you doing the research that you've done. And I'm sorry, let's just continue with this. What do you see a difference between snow versus rain? Because I personally am much more afraid of snow. We had a brutal winter in this country last year. If we have something like that this year, and everybody remember, that really didn't start until January. If we have that this year, I am terrified of a winter with mounds and mounds of snow. I have a 4-foot fence outside my house, and that thing was completely buried last year.
Yeah.
So is there a difference between snow and rain?
There's a big difference. The particles that are blowing around in the atmosphere, they're actually in a layer called the troposphere, which is the most active region, and it's very turbulent. It's where all of our storms originate from. And when you have radioactive particles floating around up there, they have an electrical charge to them, and the particles will attract water vapor. And when they attract enough water vapor, then they fall to the ground in rain. However, in snow, because snow has the jagged edges, sharp edges, when it's floating around, it's actually picking up an electrical charge itself, and it pulls these particles to it like a magnet. So you can have a bunch of particles attached to a snowflake, and then when it falls on the ground, it's going to lay around for a while.
That makes a lot of sense. The shape of the snowflake. Now you see, guys, that's how, the thing with this fallout is you can't see it, taste it, hear it, smell it, nothing. You just have to understand it's there, and it's so easy to forget. Especially if it's not blasted out over the television, then people really aren't going to pay attention, and they're not. I've seen friends post on Facebook on a rainy day, oh, we played out in the rain today, and I'm just thinking, my God, I've tried to keep my dogs out of the rain. I'm trying not to let any water build up outside where they can drink. If there's any type of thing outside that would collect water, I'm dumping it, I'm flipping it,
Well, and pets are a big one in terms of mitigation because, pets with their fur, when they go outside, especially if they're rolling around on the grass or in the dirt, these particles are going to stick to their hair, and then when the animal comes indoors, it's bringing this stuff with them, and if it lays in your kids' beds, I know animals aren't supposed to sleep in your bed, but who listens to that?
Well, if we love our pets, they sleep wherever they want.
So they lay in the beds, and then your kid's face is laying in the same place where the stuff might have fallen off your dog or your cat. So when we wash our animals now, if they come in and they get rain on them, and we just put them in the bathtub, wash them with baking soda. And the other thing you could do is use a lint roller and just go over the animal with a lint roller when it comes in the house, especially its feet. Yeah. And not only would that remove particles, but it'll remove some of the hair and allergens that might contribute to allergies within the house too. So it's kind of a pain to do that, but it's making the animal cleaner.
Well, so is dying from cancer, Christina. That's a pain too.
Right.
I mean,
right.
People got to realize this stuff, or have to realize this stuff. And you've talked about some preventative medicine things. Look, if this turned out to be a giant hoax, like you said, all those good things you're doing for yourself is just preventative medicine, so you can stay out of, the doctors, the hospitals.
Mm-hmm. And I want to also bring up a point too. And like you said, you can't really see it or taste it or smell it or know that it's there. But there has been a couple of occurrences since Fukushima happened that are really alarming. And one is a metallic taste in your mouth that can come from inhaling hot particles. And this was widely reported in April, happening in the Pacific Northwest and in parts of California. And I know what that taste is like because I used to do a test in ophthalmology where I injected patients with a dye that gave them a metallic taste. And I had that test myself, and there's nothing you can do when that taste is active. Like, you can't drink anything and make it go away. It makes food and everything taste funny. And I've had a few times just recently where I've had that taste, and it's lasted a couple of days.
I've had that as well.
So that's an indication that the air that you're breathing may have been highly radioactive.
Well, I live
another thing.
Sorry. Okay, go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Another thing is smell. And a few months back, you may have remembered a diesel fuel smell that was prevalent in the San Diego and La Jolla area. And that happened during a time when the jet stream was traveling right over that area. And when they tested the air, they found a substance called, I want to say it was chlorine-35. And chlorine-35 doesn't exist anywhere in nature except when fuel rods react with seawater, which we know was used in the reactors to cool the system when they couldn't access their fresh water supply. And a lot of those radioactive rods, when reactor 3 exploded, it blew all the rods into the ocean and around the countryside. They found chunks of plutonium a mile and a half away from the reactors. So, I mean, that stuff is percolating in the ocean over there, too. And once in a while, when it brings it over here, people were actually smelling that in San Diego that week.
And how would you know? How would you know if you're standing or walking down, the streets of beautiful La Jolla? If you're walking down there and you smell that smell, you're just going to assume it's a truck nearby. You're not going to, if it smells like diesel, you're not going to think that it's chloride, whatever you just said it was, whatever. That doesn't sound very healthy, for sure.
Right.
But I mean,
right. I guess thousands of people were calling. It was so bad. Originally, the people were thinking there was a plane crash or something that was causing it because it was so strong.
Do you know what they were told? Do you know what they were told?
No.
Okay. All right.
No, I don't know if it was even the conclusion was drawn. We have this press blackout going on here right now that came from Obama when Fort Calhoun in Nebraska, the Cooper plant, got flooded.
Yes.
And this was back in May.
Yep.
When they declared this blackout, and the blackout is probably applying to anything that's related to nuke plants, radiation. Once in a while, and in fact, recently I've seen more stories about the China syndrome possibility, and the New York Times actually ran one the other day, and the Washington Post too, because there's been a few researchers that have come out and said, look, this stuff is under the plants. It's inevitable that it's going to hit a large vein of groundwater.
Well,
it could happen any day. Even the architect that built Unit 3, reactor number 3, is saying this is going to happen. And that's another thing, like
Haru, his name is. I have that article sitting right in front of me where he says he is the architect of Fukushima Daiichi Reactor 3, former president of Sega University, and had he admitted that TEPCO's explanation makes no sense and the China syndrome is inevitable.
Mm-hmm.
That's what he's saying. And what is it? Can you describe the China syndrome for people, for those youngsters out there that don't know that movie?
I've actually never seen that movie.
No.
In theory, it's a meltout of the fuel in the nuclear reactor that gets into the ground and burns its way through the earth to the other side.
I believe it's Michael Douglas and Jane Fonda. Michael Douglas has great hair in that movie. But yes, anyways, it's about a core meltdown into the earth, and then it blows up.
Right. Well, before it gets to the middle of the earth, it may just blow up 30 to 40 feet under the plants, which is where the researchers at Kyoto University are saying the corium is now. And they estimate that within a year from now, it'll probably be 100 feet under the plants. I mean, the smartest people in the world have no idea how to stop this. And really, if there was what's called a hydrovolcanic explosion, where enough of this material reacted and blew the whole plant sky high, that as terrible as that sounds, as horrific as it sounds, it could actually be a good thing. And that's because instead of these, never-ending releases coming out of this plant and blowing over here, everything would go up at once. It would, be blown up into the jet stream, into the ocean, all over the countryside, and Tokyo would be toast. Absolutely, if it isn't already. They're detecting, Chernobyl levels in hotspots all over Tokyo right now.
Yeah, I've actually read things where they said they have been thinking about moving to moving Tokyo or naming another capital city of Japan or something like that. I don't know how true those reports are, but I have read that.
And our military was actually considering blowing up that plant back in July. They were ready to do it, but the Japanese government won't evacuate Tokyo. And, there's 35 million people in the greater Tokyo area. It's a very, very densely populated area. And I saw a math problem on any news where this mathematician calculated if you used every 747 in the world and you flew them in and out of Tokyo nonstop, to evacuate the population, that it would take something like 5 or 6 years to evacuate everyone. So I mean, it's really not a possibility. If people get out on their own, that's great. But these people are just stuck there, and if that place goes, we will have time here to deal with it. I don't know what kind of government intervention or authoritative measures would be taken, but back in the 60s, when we were worried about getting nuked from Russia, if a nuke went off here, the civil defense had done extensive research about how to protect the population, and civil defense was disbanded years ago and broken into two new organizations, the FEMA and the Department of Homeland Security. So, but we have all these research papers. In fact, you can find them all. They're archived on FEMA's website. And there was research done on how to protect cattle in that situation, how to mitigate the general population's exposure. And what they said to do would be people would have to shelter indoors, and that means nobody's going to school, nobody's going to work, you won't even be able to go outside. And
that'll
so
help the economy.
A gigantic plume passes us and settles down, and then everyone can come out and actually start the decontamination process, which means the top 6 inches of soil would have to be removed everywhere and dealt with or buried. That's what we'd have to do to decontaminate. But, how many people have 2 to 4 weeks of supplies in their house right now?
Well, the DHS, Department of Homeland Security, just said that if you have more than 7 days worth of stored food, you could be a terrorist. So, I don't know how many people. I personally do have enough food to hang out that long. But are you? This is in reference to if there was a hydrovolcanic explosion.
What the civil defense was concerned, if there was a nuke that went off in one of our major cities here.
Okay.
That's how they would recommend. So I mean, a hydrovolcanic explosion of a nuke plant with 6 reactors is going to be, I don't even know what the equivalency would be to a bomb. It'd probably be the biggest nuclear detonation in the history of mankind. And it would probably generate a lot of fires and things like that with nuclear material burning. And that 14 to 30 days would be after the end of all the fires going out. Because as long as that stuff is burning, it's sending things continuously into the atmosphere also. So, I mean, it could even be a lot longer than that we'd have to stay inside. But, the water supply would just absolutely be toast if that happened. And all the cattle and things, they would have to be sheltered in barns. All of the hay that feeds them would have to be tarped.
I mean, think about it. You're talking water supplies, food supplies, economy. What about people on medications that need them daily?
Right. You have to stockpile a little bit of that stuff to have it,
Right. We're talking bad stuff. I mean, and this, it looks, if we're talking inevitability as the architect of Reactor 3 says, and I won't take his, word as completely accurate, because like you said, nobody really knows what they're dealing with, but that seems to be, the future of this thing.
Mhm. And it could be a good thing to get it all over with at once. The bad thing that will come out of that too is people are not going to be prepared. If this happens and the government does say, I mean, there's going to be such a panic of people getting supplies. And if you at least start thinking about this now and talking, to your spouse about it, or your family members, like just what would we do in this situation? What would the plan be? Just have some kind of plan that you can put into place if this happens. I mean, that's all we can do. This is completely out of control, and there's no way to stop it. No one knows how to stop it. We are in completely uncharted territory. I'm worried about the daily releases as it is, but that situation it would be just absolutely catastrophic, especially for the people in Japan.
There's a comment in chat. saying Japan is burning tsunami waste through 2014. They're burning it right now. And,
my God, yes.
And
yes.
Artie Gunderson, who was in the clip I played at the opening of the show, said that it's like Fukushima happening all over again.
They've been, you see the pictures of the tsunami waste, just endless hundreds of miles of houses and lumber and everything. And those particles from just the Fukushima plant have settled onto all of this debris for months. They started burning it back at the end of around September, around when these levels started getting higher. And they're trucking it all over Japan to burn it too. So they're contaminating even more of their own countryside, and that's blowing over here in addition to what the plant is releasing. Now what it leaves afterward is an ash that's highly radioactive. They're dumping that ash in Tokyo Bay, and right now they have so much of it would fill, and this was from Arnie Gunderson the other day, 50 football fields 20 meters deep. That's how much of this ash they have, and there is nowhere to put it. So they're dumping it in Tokyo Bay. They have it tarped. These tarps just are getting expanded and expanded, and I don't know what they're going to do with that. I mean, it may just be Tokyo just may become a radioactive wasteland at some point, and it's terrible. I mean, if you look at the pictures and the history and the architecture, and I mean, there's so much beauty in that country. I don't blame people for not wanting to leave it, and for somewhat being maybe in denial about the situation, because I mean, what if you can't afford to move? Their government can't afford to move people and pay to relocate them, so they're just not doing it.
Did you? I know. Did you hear? I don't remember what airline it was. Was it American Airlines or something offering free flights to Japan a while ago to help boost. You had to like submit a little, I don't know, a letter or something saying why you'd want to be picked to like boost tourism. I mean, and I was reading the comment thread under this article, and people were like, yeah, I'm going, I'm doing it, and I'm just thinking to myself, wow.
Yeah.
I don't know. So let me ask you this: before you started looking into this thing,
mm-hmm.
you told me, or you wrote to me, that you were pro-nuclear power. Are you still?
After looking at both sides of the situation, the biggest concern that I have is the releases that are made as part of like routine venting from these plants, and the spent fuel, which basically just sits in these ponds, which were only meant to be a temporary housing. But that's why they have so much of it. Eventually it's supposed to be put into like concrete, it's called a dry cast, concrete containers where it sits, for hundreds of thousands of years so people can deal with it, or buried in these huge repositories. And they built one in New Mexico a few years ago, and then there's an interesting story that goes along with that. They had a plan to build one at Yucca Mountain in Nevada, which Obama canceled.
Yeah, Harry Reid wasn't into that. Harry Reid didn't like that.
And there's another one, I want to say it's in Finland or Norway, and there's a really good documentary called Into Eternity about that particular repository that's miles and miles underground in a very stable bedrock. They've actually are designing hieroglyphics to go on the entrance of this thing so that 100,000 years from now, if people came across it, they would know not to go into it because it's so dangerous. Not knowing what kind of language these people would speak, they're actually designing hieroglyphics like, the Egyptians did on their pyramids to explain to people what's going to be in the ground there. In New Mexico, the NRC was in search of an area throughout the country where they could build one of these repositories, and they got chased out of every state until they got to New Mexico. And New Mexico said, okay, we'll allow you to build one here, but if we let you do that, then the federal government needs to replace our entire road system, all the freeways and highways need to be rebuilt. So the federal government said, okay, we'll do that. And as soon as they finished the project, New Mexico legislature voted to make it illegal to transport radioactive materials across their roads.
Good.
So they got free roads out of the deal. And the only people that can put stuff there now is the federal government. And I don't know how they get it in there, if they fly it in or they bring it in by railroad. So we do have one of those. Yucca Mountain was supposed to be another one, but since we don't have any for the regular nuke plants now, which there are 100 in this country, the stuff is just sitting in these ponds. And these ponds are just big metal boxes with water in them. And some of them in the reactor design, like Fukushima, are on the 4th floor above the reactors.
Yeah, they sit on top, yeah.
And we have 23 of those in the United States. One of them, Fermi 2, in Michigan, is that reactor design. It's called a Mark I boiling water reactor made by General Electric. And this type of reactor design is extremely unsafe. For one thing, because of those fuel pools being on the 4th floor. The other thing is that the water that is used to cool the fuel comes in direct contact with the rods. And the third thing is that their design makes them so top-heavy that even under normal operations, the reactors sink into the ground, and there's this torus, this donut-shaped thing that goes around the outside of the reactor. They have to use straps to pull those down because they want to rise up because of the weight of the reactor. And GE has even said these reactors are unsafe. They need to have modifications made to them. I mean, if anything, the reactors that we have like that here need to be shut down immediately.
Yes, but they're not being shut down.
Especially the ones that are on the Great Lakes, you know?
Yeah.
And
but
I mean, that's just a...
But they're not being shut down. In fact, nothing's happening because the NRC does absolutely nothing. I mean, when you look at the nuclear industry, it is so shady and so shoddy. I mean, backup plans or diesel generators that fail over 65% of the time in during testing. I mean, we're talking about humanity here. You know what I mean?
Right, and the other thing that most people don't know, if they have new plants in their own state, you helped build those sites.
Yes.
Because when a company puts in a bid to make one of these plants, they're subsidized by the state when they build them. Then the customers paying for the electricity pay to run the plants, and if there is a nuke accident, because of something called Price-Anderson, the company that owns the reactor site is only liable for the first $10 billion. After that, the taxpayers pick up the cost of cleaning it up. And right now, the Fukushima they're estimating between $350 and $450 billion.
Right. And I mean. And are they cleaning it up?
We're paying to run these plants that are killing us.
Yes, I mean,
basically what's happening.
And
it's so ridiculous.
And the Obama administration a while ago allocated something like $50 billion towards the nuclear industry. I mean, you know, we're moving in the wrong direction. Once again, I'll use it on every front in this on the planet, in society, as human beings. We are being. You know, we're going in the wrong direction. We're going down paths of total destruction. And, you know, so my question again, which you didn't answer, are you still pro nuclear power?
No.
Oh, thank you for saying that.
When a coal plant blows up, you know, it doesn't kill everybody on the planet. It doesn't have the potential to do that. When a nuke plant goes, it does. The effects are never ending, and you know there's only so much you can do politically, and hopefully as people catch on to this, you know, my more immediate concern though is mitigation of what's out there already, regardless of where it's coming from. If it's coming from a plant that you're downwind from, if it's coming from Cooper in Nebraska, or it's coming from Fort Calhoun, or if it's coming from Fukushima, there's very easy things that we can be doing to mitigate that. And I want people to be, keeping track of whether some of the symptoms of sickness in their own families could be attributed to this. And so we get doctors on board looking for it also, because like I said, they haven't been trained. And even some of my family members still don't believe me about this, even though it's pretty much all I talk about anymore, because they don't see anything in mainstream media about it. So they have a hard time accepting that this could be happening.
Well, Christina, mind control is a conspiracy theory. Always remember that.
Mm-hmm.
And I say that because, like you're saying, you're obviously very well spoken about this topic, and if people that supposedly love and trust you just don't want to hear it or don't believe it, I can't really chalk it up to anything else besides mind control.
Right.
People, when I talk about mind control, people think it's your eyeballs doing little swirlies like in cartoons or something like that. It goes much deeper into the human psyche than that. And that's really the only explanation. Again, it has to go beyond denial, because when you're talking about, people that you care about and supposedly care about you, I'm sure there's younger generations there that these people are attached to. You would assume that they would be concerned, at least entertain the thought, hear you out and say, well, geez, if all I have to do is, maybe, give my kids and myself some clay and some baking soda and do some of the other things that we talked about, which are really, number one, very cost effective. All of these things are not expensive at all.
Right.
And just an overall general increase in your health. Why not do them? Why sit there and shake your head and say, no, that's not true. I don't believe it.
Mm-hmm.
So let me ask you this. Since you've been made aware of the massive, I'll say, cover-up and lies, okay, we'll just call it what it is, instead of, miscalculations or not saying anything. We are purposely being exposed to this, and no one's talking about it.
Right.
Since you've discovered this, has your view, because I don't really know anything about you besides the nuclear stuff, has your view of our governments in general, the world, has it changed at all?
Yeah, I wish I could move.
Where would you move to?
Southern Hemisphere.
Southern Hemisphere. Okay. And
there's less radiation there. That's all it comes down to. And I told my ex-husband too, when you see your family at Christmas, we have a lot of little kids in this family. You guys really need to talk about the possibility of this. And I don't even know if that's far enough, really.
Right.
I don't even know if you could escape it, but it's certainly better than living here, and especially with no end in sight.
Yeah. I'm sure you're aware of the number of nuclear plants in the United States, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if you looked at where a lot of these plants are built, once again, on fault lines, near shorelines also, if we look at the uptick in earthquake activity and what it's being attributed to, which, obviously you're not going to get any official word on what's causing the uptick in earthquake activity. But if you want to get into a little free thinking and honest truth, well, we can kind of maybe come up with some ideas. It most likely has to do with our solar system lining up with the center of our galaxy and moving into the solar maximum, which is another side effect of this alignment we're moving into.
Well, there are earthquake speculations that they do. Their projections, the possibility of having, over a certain magnitude in the areas where some of these plants have been built, that has just completely gone out the window with the uptick that we've had. And I've heard some very interesting theories about the post-glacial rebound, which some researchers speculate is happening not from global warming, but from all the emissions from these plants that land on snowpacks like Greenland. It's causing just gigatons of water to be melting off of these areas, and even NASA is saying now that the ocean floor is sinking. The sea levels aren't rising, but the ocean floor is sinking to compensate for the extra weight of the water that's melting from these polar regions. And when that happens, there's a bowing that occurs in the continents, and in the weakest areas along the faults, like in Virginia, that's could possibly be why we had this earthquake in Virginia. And you follow some of these lines, you follow the craton. If you look at an outline of where the craton sits, you can see there's earthquakes happening all along that area.
All on the perimeter of the craton. Yeah, you're exactly right.
There's definitely a lot of movement that's
for those listeners out there. I'm sorry, Christina. For those listeners out there that don't know what the craton plate is, the craton plate, however you want to pronounce it, it's kind of like if you look at a map of the United States. It starts in the upper northwest and kind of drops down in like a U shape and goes right back up into the upper northeast. And like Christina is saying, if you look at where a lot of this earthquake activity has increased, it is all along the perimeter of the craton.
Yeah, if you go on the USGS site right now and look at all the earthquakes that have happened in the last 30 days, the map is right on there. They have a worldwide map and a U.S. map.
Yes.
You clearly can see the outline of the craton. I mean, there's definitely a lot of movement that's going on that we haven't had before. And Arnie Gunderson had said too, the calculations that they've made for the probability of certain magnitude, they can't go off that old data anymore because we're in a whole new set of data now.
Right. Well, look at the earthquake that rocked Fukushima. I mean, they're saying it was some say as an 8.9, 9.1, but right after Richter died, they lowered the Richter scale by 1. So what you're really looking at, back in the day on the Richter scale would either be a 9.8 or a 10.1.
Mhm.
So, I mean, when we see earthquakes like that happening, I don't know, and the frequency. I watch earthquakes every day. The amount of, let's say, I'll say the frequency is increasing and the intensity is definitely increasing. The amount of 5 point plus whatever earthquakes has increased dramatically over the past couple weeks, if not longer. And when we have NASA coming out and talking about the threat of solar storms causing an electromagnetic pulse effect, knocking out power, I mean, we're talking. I mean,
that's a whole nother ball game, and why all the nuke plants need to be shut down immediately, and I'll tell you why.
Exactly.
If one good X flare takes out our electrical grid, there isn't a single plant in the United States that can continue cooling its fuel beyond 8 hours.
Right.
And it's because of the large amounts diesel fuel that would be needed to run the generator systems. You know, and especially if there's a major earthquake and diesel trucks can't get through to the sites. And the California Utility Commission sent out a letter to PG&E that runs the electrical for California back in March, and they said, because of the sun activity that's occurring, you really need to check all your transformers, and there's no transformers that are more important than the ones that are attached to nuke plants.
Right.
And, Fukushima is bad enough.
Right.
If we get one of those plants or a multitude of those plants that go down here, after the fuel starts melting down and it goes into the ground, we're going to have the same thing here. And our sun is doing some really crazy stuff right now. NASA had a press conference about it a few months back, and I actually have the quote of what was said during the conference. Observation is ahead of understanding the technique of extracting data. They're getting data from the sun that they have never seen before and they have no explanation of. And I don't even know how many satellites we have up there right now watching what the sun is doing, but it's blowing off huge chunks of magnetic material. We've been lucky. There's been some flares that have been kicked out that have just glanced Earth.
Yes. Yeah. I'm going to do
get some kind of direct hit though, and our power goes out, after 4 to 8 hours. A lot of those plants can only cool their stuff for 4 hours. If it goes beyond 8 hours, so the plants are going to start melting down over here.
Right.
And a good enough, if we had an X flare like the one back in the early 1900s, the Carrington event, I believe it was called.
Yep.
If we had something like that here, our electrical grid would be toast for years. We would be back in the dark ages.
Yes.
And that's Michio Kaku, who's the world famous astrophysicist, saying that.
And total globalist whore, by the way, just so you know.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I don't trust that. I used to like that guy, but I always had my suspicions. But when he came out with a statement saying anybody that is opposed to world government is a terrorist, which he actually said that. I've played that clip on the show. That was about all I wanted. Oh, yeah, that's about all I need to hear from that guy, honestly. I don't want to hear from him anymore.
He is right about the kerosene effect, though.
Yeah,
it was an X45 flare. And the X flares that we get now are like a 2 point something. That was an X45.
Yeah.
People could see it without telescopes or anything when it happened. It was so huge.
Wow. But this is what, this is how we got on this little run here on this topic. I am pretty sure. Now, like I said, I'm smart enough to know that I know nothing, but I'm pretty sure that all the big brains knew that we were going to head into a solar maximum, right? They probably knew this 10 years ago, and they're saying that this will be one of the most active ones ever, I guess, like they've been around for all of time. I don't know how they can actually say that, but what they're referring to is it's going to be bad. And like you said, nothing's being done. So, I go back to my question when I asked you, has your view of things changed? I mean, do you believe that this is just carelessness, or do you believe that, like I believe, that this is a complete setup? And when I say that, look, people will be like, well, Darren, why would they do that? They have to live here too. Well, you know what? I don't know if they actually do. Okay? I don't know that. I do know that they have massive underground bases. That's no secret anymore. And anybody that's in denial about that is just probably in denial about everything. So, that is the fact. And like I said in the beginning when I made the reptilian comment, I don't necessarily believe, David Icke and reptilians. I don't necessarily believe that. But again, it wouldn't shock me,
Right.
I've said to friends before, look, it wouldn't shock me if I woke up one morning and the military had opened up an interdimensional portal and there was, 50-foot giant, flesh-eating creatures tramping all over the place. I wouldn't be surprised, because I don't think we know jack about anything that's really going on. And when you have the powers that be allowing billions of innocent people to be put in harm's way like this, and people want to deny that there's a depopulation program, happening right now. I mean, what do you chalk all this up to? Do you chalk it up just to carelessness, to greed, to
greed
laziness?
and control?
Yeah, but what are you going to control, and what are you going to have if EMP type thing happens and we have 125 or how many nuke plants are in the country, simultaneously melting down? I mean, control and greed over what? I mean, you know what I mean?
I think their end goal is just to have less people around. I mean, there's definitely too many people on this planet in terms of supplies as it is. I mean, that's true of the population. I mean, this isn't a way to get rid of them.
Well,
you educate people, and you.
I disagree with you a little bit about the number of people being too many on the planet. I mean, in my opinion, a lot of the issues with the population, a lot of them are contrived. I mean, look, if you have all this starving in Africa, yet we have cloud seeding technology since 1952, you could make it rain there. You could supply crops for those people. You could stop, climate events from destroying farmland, and you don't have to let nuclear power plants pollute farmland, and you don't have to let Fukushima destroy our produce and our food. So yes, it appears there's too many people on the planet, but we really don't know because when you have awesome people like Bill Gates out there spreading his little vaccine and nanotech mosquitoes all over the place. I mean, is there really too many people? I don't know. My personal opinion is that the population would reach a state of homeostasis. It would be there if we lived a different way. And I'm talking totally different. It's a way that we never will. In my lifetime, your lifetime, that will never happen. My vision of that will never happen because we're talking free energy, and that means no more control. And that's why we're not allowed to have. That's why when I had a solar guy come up here and give me a consultation of what it would take for me to get off grid and go totally solar, it was $73,000. $73,000. Now, if they're all concerned about the environment and this ridiculous green movement, which I'm pro-environment, by the way, Christine. I love animals. I live in the woods. I don't even kill a bug. I try to let it out the door. When we have all this going on, I mean, it just, I don't know. To me, I can't really see that. I can't really make statements like there's too many people because I don't know enough about that. And I do know that a lot of people are forced into death and forced into poverty and dumbed down and not allowed to have things that would allow them to live a much more pure and nature-oriented life. And I think that if people were allowed to do that, then there wouldn't be so many people. And people would understand that they could how to live within their means. I mean, look, if we can sit around and pump out babies all day because we have electricity and we have the grocery store down the road and we have the idiot box in our living room, I mean, there's really no conceptualization about what reality is.
Right.
It truly is.
It's very, very difficult to wrap your brain around some of the things that you're talking about, and it's something that I keep coming across and reading about and kind of formulating an opinion on it as I go along. But the one thing that Obama said that I agree with, one of the only things that I agree with that he said is that nothing is sustainable at its current trajectory, and you can apply that statement to everything, the banking system and water supply and food supply and so forth, and especially if it's becoming radioactive and if it's being genetically manipulated. These concepts, I mean, it is all you can really do is start within your own family, protect yourselves, look at all the things that you're running around your house in terms of electricity and so forth, and a lot of those things aren't always necessary to have your Wi-Fi on 24 hours a day and things like that. And they don't really attack it from that perspective because they want you to use more power. You're making more money for the industries that are supplying you with power.
They want you to be distracted.
Right, and a lot of the bees and things are disappearing, and it may be related to some of those things that we're running all the time, like our Wi-Fi. And when you start to see the possible correlations between what you're doing in your everyday life, all you can really do is make some changes in your own home, and then try to spread the word and educate others to look into this too.
Yeah, in my opinion, some of the things that you're mentioning, like Obama's statement and looking at our everyday life, I agree with you on looking at what we do every day. But I will also say that fails in comparison to corporate crimes such as Fukushima and BP and Monsanto. I would look towards genetically modified crops and bees dying off before I look at Wi-Fi. I'd also look at smart meters and and things like that. But again, I'm not the guy who came up with the smart meter idea and decided to force everybody to throw it on their house. I'm not the guy running BP that said, hey, look, the ocean floor is rising with a big oil zit. Let's punch into it and see what happens. That wasn't me. You know, we aren't the people who are lying to everybody on the planet about the true horrors of Fukushima. So yes, although we should all, you know, look at how we live differently. And my thing is, I hate the government. I hate them. I hate them. Okay, so I try to be as independent from them as possible. I don't want your help. I don't need their help. To me, that's like, you know, running to the Godfather for something. There's always strings attached, and if you don't do what they want, well, you know, you get a horse head in your bed or you get some cement shoes. Right. You know, so I agree with you. We all need to look at that, but, you know, let's really point the blame where it should be. I mean, we have this guy, Barry, in there, and I'm no Democrat, I'm no Republican, I'm nothing. I don't like any of them. They all work together to screw us. When he makes statements like that, really what he's referring to is, well, hey, you know, the way things are going, it's not going to work out. So, you know, you're going to have to let us take over and, quote unquote, regulate everything. You know, that's my view on that. Sorry. I ranted a little bit. I'm sorry. I had a 5-hour energy before the show, so I'm a little jacked.
No, that's how you get, you know, come up with ideas, getting information, and even, you know, sometimes the best discussions come from, you know, disagreement, seeing another view of it, another side of it. I just try to be open to everything.
Yeah. Well, I'm not disagreeing with you. I agree with you. I'm not disagreeing, but I am saying that, you know, in my opinion, there's bigger crooks to look at besides me and you struggling every day to try to make ends meet. You know. Yeah. You know, if we find a little relief by having some Wi-Fi or an internet connection, you know, after we've worked 40 hours and gotten 65% of our total earned income raped from us over our lifetime, you know, I don't know. I just I think there are a lot of problems would be solved if we got rid of the bad guys. And I don't know what to do after that. I'm not a guy with a lot of solutions as far as you know, getting rid of the government. I say that as thinking adults, hopefully we could all come up with something better. You know, but that's a whole nother show. So Christina, what do you you know, what's most important to you? What's the most important bit of information that you want to get out to people? And if we've already covered it, I'm sure we have, but you know, maybe break it down a little bit.
What's start
non-active?
Looking into mitigation, paying attention to what's going on locally, making observations, simple observations, even if you don't have a Geiger counter, and to get an idea. There's probably someone in your area that does, and if they do, they're posting results on forums like Any News of what their readings are. And I've been watching this long enough to see that the higher rates of fallout are definitely occurring in precipitation and along not just the jet stream itself, but along the edges of it where the wind slows down a bit. And radionuclides have a tendency to group together. It's called bioaccumulation. They're attracted to each other by the electrical charge. And something that's being noticed, and now that we're having snowfall to measure, is that not only is the snow radioactive, but when people are measuring in their houses during snowfall, the numbers in their houses are going down in their room air. And that's because the air is being cleaned by the snow. The charged particles are pulling the radiation out of your house and into your snow. I mean, that's really a scary thought, but I mean, that's how it works. And these things group together in your body too. So you can do everything that you can to be healthy and start making observations around you. You know, when it rains in the summer, there should be worms all over the place. I haven't seen worms out here on the pavement, on the sidewalks at all during the summer. And when I've dug into the ground, the worms are very lethargic, if they're there at all. And that's something that's being noticed by other people too, that in barns and so forth, the worms are okay if you dig into the ground, but in the outdoors where it's raining, they're not. looking at animals in the spring is going to be a big one, because if we have radiation fallout in our snow and it all melts at once and goes into the streams and rivers, and then animals are breeding, smaller animals, have faster gestation rates, their cells divide quickly. I noticed mutations in some of the ducks in the pond behind my house this summer. Towards the end of summer, there was a ducks that had small wings on one side. And dead animals just laying around the woods around here, just walking on the trails. Usually animals, when they feel sick or they're going to die, they crawl into a dark space and they hide. These animals are just dying out in the open. I've had Canadian geese that are dying overnight around this pond, and this pond is a retention pond, so it's getting a lot of rain from like different parking lots and stuff that sit higher than me. So there's probably more of a concentration there. Any low-lying areas, there's going to be higher concentrations. Look at the plants around you. I've already seen mutations in oak trees here, and I've got some pictures of it on my site where the top of the oak tree saplings, the tree is only about 2 feet tall, and it should have 3 leaves branching out from each segment, and instead it has this little thing that looks like a pom-pom on top of it, of leaves. That's a mutation. Start looking around for those kinds of things to get clues about what things may be like in your area, because it's really very difficult to predict unless we did a full-out radiation survey of all of our soil right now, what the levels are, and it would have to be ongoing. And I've put together a form letter for anyone who needs a job. If you can afford a Geiger counter, you could start your own business and start going around, and at first you'd have to work, for free. Check all the people that you know, check your own house. There's certain places in the house where levels are going to be higher, especially where you come inside and you take off your shoes. And it's going to be higher the more you get to the west, although we've had plutonium that's been detected in Boston from Fukushima already, and that's 7,000 miles
And that means
away.
It went right by me.
Yeah, it went right by all of us. But, it's hard to, you can't really say for certain where it is unless you do a full-scale survey. And we need thousands of people doing this in every state, going around, checking the water, checking the ground, making these observations, and then, you check all the people that you know, your loved ones, your neighbors, and if you find stuff, it'll catch on like wildfire. They'll start referring you. You can go to their houses, check their yards. You can give them a printed out sheet from the internet of how to mitigate this.
Right.
And
Are you referring to radiationnetwork.com?
I watch them occasionally, but what I've noticed is anytime there's a high reading, it gets pulled. I'm not sure how much I trust that radiation network.
Well, I'll tell you, I can't speak for everybody in the network, but I have friends that are actually in that network, and actually one of them usually is in chat. Well, two of them, one of them is in chat right now, and usually the other guy's in there. He just got a Geiger counter. Speaking of that, can you recommend a place where people could purchase a Geiger counter, a good Geiger counter? I know nothing about them. That's why I'm asking.
Well, right now, the only place that you can get one quickly is off eBay. And the best ones, the ones that Arnie Gunderson recommends, are called an Inspector, and it's about $700.
Okay.
But you can get one called a SOEKS. It's spelled SOEKS. For about $180 delivered, and you get it, within 2 to 4 weeks if you bought it off eBay. That's the only hang-up to this idea is there's not enough Geiger counters to go around.
Right.
And if you try to order them from a manufacturer or a supply house, I had a friend that ordered one in April. She just got it.
Wow.
And they're running about 7 months behind to the demand. So hopefully they'll pick up soon.
Well, I'm surprised the Obama administration hasn't cried job creation and patted themselves on the back. With
because they know what's going to be found, and they know what that leads to. That leads to people looking at nuke plants here, and they're protecting them. In addition to all the possible depopulation agenda that might be occurring, nuke plants generate 500 pounds of plutonium in each reactor over a year's time, and plutonium is used in bomb making.
Yeah. Yeah. So,
so they're reaping the benefits of that excess material and using it to fight wars. And you look at what's happening in the countries that we've bombed, in Afghanistan and Fallujah, and I mean the birth defects there are just outrageous. And not only are the people living in those areas,
you're referring to depleted uranium, right?
Depleted uranium, and now they're using something called enriched uranium, where they pack a very dense hydrogen into the warhead, and it pulverizes a tank.
Christina, please. That is called spreading freedom and democracy. Okay? That's what that's called. Let's not mix things up here. Kinetic military action, spreading freedom and democracy. All right. I'm sorry. The Orwellian speak just makes me freak.
Well, the sad thing is, though, it's not just those countries that are suffering from all that exposure, but our guys, our military, are coming back from there, and they're having babies, and those babies are having problems.
Right. I mean, look, I've gone off on rants on this program about that whole thing, and I'm not going to start with that again. I'm sure my listeners are going to be like, oh, no, not again. But yes, I understand that, and it enrages me. It enrages me, when I hear people say certain things about it. But I'm not going to go there because I will end up falling into that rant. But what I want to do, as the show's winding down, let's try to end this on the most positive note that we can. For things that people can do to protect themselves, we'll go over it one more time. You can ingest things like spirulina and chlorella, and take Christina's advice. Obviously, don't buy anything from Japan. Those two substances, spirulina and chlorella. Japan's a large manufacturer of both of those. So, what'd you say? Norway?
Norway kelp.
Norway kelp. Okay.
Yeah.
Baking soda, bentonite clay. I mean, these things that we're talking about, the spirulina and chlorella are more expensive, obviously, than bentonite clay and obviously baking soda. What about potassium iodide, Christina? When do you recommend that comes into play? Because I got a little bottle sitting right here. If you guys notice in chat, I threw up a picture of my personal RAD protection kit sent to me by Jules. My listeners know who Jules is. She's the one that helps me with our website and does a lot of great stuff for the show.
We had a large iodine 131 plume that went through St. Louis and then up into Michigan about 4 weeks ago. Mm-hmm. And I went to CVS to order potassium iodide for my family and some for my daughter that lives in Utah. Mm-hmm. And the pharmacist looked at me and he's like, we don't usually stock that, but I can order it from you. What do you want it for? And I did the 5-second explanation of Fukushima and got the crazy look from him. And then a few days later I went in to pick it up, and he pulled me aside and he said, every manufacturer in the country is out of it right now.
When was
Someone has bought huge quantities of this stuff recently.
When was that?
Ago.
Month ago.
A month ago. You can still get it from some internet websites, but I'm just working the high potassium foods into our diet every day. Avocados, nuts, dates. There's foods that are naturally high in potassium, and I think it's a good idea to eat as many of those as you can right now.
Yep. Coconut milk also, everybody. Coconut milk, very high in potassium.
Oh, coconut milk, hemp milk, soy milk, almond milk. You can get powdered milk, too, and I've been told that the powdering process actually removes cesium, but I haven't been able to verify that.
Really?
Yeah, but any kind of boxed milk that's older than March would be okay.
Right.
So you have those options. Eating lower on the food chain is a big one because the higher up, because of biomagnification, the higher up you go in the food chain, the stronger the concentration of radionuclides. And I had a hard time wrapping my mind around that, too, because I thought the bigger the animal, the more diluted it should be. But when you look at a map, and you have these little bugs in the ocean, if each one of those has a particle and they're eaten by a fish, then that fish might eat 8 or 9 of those a day. So now it has 9 particles in it.
Right.
And then something comes along and eats that fish, and each one of those had 8 or 9 particles in it. Then it's got 24 particles in it, and then something comes along and eats that. And that happens very rapidly. It can happen over the matter of days. In fact, when Russia detonated the Tsar bomb, king of the bombs. It was like a 50 megaton explosion that they did right before the comprehensive test ban went into effect.
Right.
There's videos of it on YouTube. It's unbelievable.
Well, it's for
Fallout,
peace and freedom.
Within a week, they detected radiation in the thyroids of mammals in the U.S. from that detonation, and that was before it even appeared in water or plants. It moves up that quickly. So if you eat lower on the food chain, you eat more plants, the higher concentrations are going to be in meat and in products from animals like milk.
Right,
so it's best to limit as much of that as possible.
Which we really should be eating a lot more vegetables anyway. We really should be. What do you think about wearing, say, like a respirator mask?
Like the 93 or 95 mask?
Right, I have a box
getting
of them
those
right
for
here.
me for Christmas, in addition to a stamp dosimeter.
A what?
You buy these little stamps. These stamps, it's like the size of a postage stamp,
yeah.
and it shows what your cumulative radiation exposure is. It's like 5 for $25. If I could afford it, everyone in my family would be getting a Geiger counter for Christmas.
Now, when should I be wearing my N95 respirator mask? Right now?
Probably anytime you go outside, if anything, so people will ask you, why are you wearing that? And you can tell them.
Right. I was gonna start wearing them out in public and write Fukushima across it.
Mhm.
You know, just so I'd get the look, and maybe, you know, every once in a while someone might ask me about it. You know, I was standing outside the other night, and I had a flashlight, and there was all kinds of stuff flying around in the air. Now, I don't know what it was. A lot of people have, you know, wood stoves where I live, so it could have been that type of stuff. I don't know, but there was a lot of particulate matter in the air, and that makes me remember back in the summer we had air quality warnings here for quote unquote particulate matter. That's all they said.
Right.
So
I noticed that too, taking photographs outside one night. I had my flash on by mistake, and I was trying to shoot some pictures of the moon, and the stuff that showed up in this image was crazy, the amount of dust that was in the air that night. And, you know, with people burning leaves too, it's been raining on those leaves all summer. They're falling off the trees now. Those hot particles, they don't just disappear.
Right.
When you burn those leaves now, you're sending it back up into the air too. And
yeah,
all that stuff really needs to be buried.
Right. Now that you said that, I'm thinking my firewood. Right?
Yeah. Do you have a Geiger counter?
I don't. I'd like to get one. Are you going to get me one for Christmas?
No, but somebody should.
Well, I'm going to work on getting one. That's why I wanted to know. That's why I wanted some suggestions on where to get one.
Yeah, and even if you can go in with a couple of your neighbors and get the higher end one.
Oh my God, are you kidding me?
With your family.
You're assuming that people are going to be on board with this. I mean, come on. I don't know if you're like me, Christina, but most people in my personal life don't really go where I go with this stuff. They don't want to hear it.
Well, if they're like my friends are too busy working. They're so wrapped up in what they're doing and the demands that are being put on them right now from their employers because of how bad the economy is. You know, I mean, they don't have time, and when they're not busy working, they're trying to figure out ways to pay their taxes. They don't have time to look into any of this stuff.
Right, they're stuck on the hamster wheel. I know. Look, I tell people I understand going for those last remaining, faux dollars. Dead men walking is what they are, But you gotta find a happy medium between knowing what's happening and and hitting the daily grind, because if that's all you're focused on, the day is going to come, and I think it's going to come soon, where you're going to be like, I wish I paid attention. I wish I paid attention because, I don't know. I don't know.
My biggest fear is for little kids and the effects of cesium. Cesium affects the heart muscle. We know so much from Chernobyl.
Right.
And if you start applying that to what's going on with Fukushima. There was 800 kilograms of uranium in the reactor that blew in Chernobyl. There were 85,000 kilograms of uranium, and that's just one of the things that was in those reactors. I've heard anywhere from 200 to 1,600 different radionuclides are in reactors, and you don't have to be a physicist to understand this stuff. All radiation is bad.
Right.
And all of it is going to affect your health in different ways, and there's easy things that you can do about it. But the cesium destroys kids' hearts. And there's a documentary you can watch about this called Chernobyl Heart. It'll absolutely change your life. It's even low levels of radiation affect kids' hearts. And children are born with like 3 billion heart cells. And those numbers don't change throughout your life very little. I think they go up by like 1%. So if their heart muscle is damaged, it doesn't matter to what extent, they're going to have a poor quality of life. And, things are bad enough with job market and economy and everything else going on. But if you're sick too, what are we doing to these children? It's just profoundly sad. I used to really do a lot of work with kids in the clinic where I worked in these studies, because we treated a lot of kids that got eye problems because they were going through radiation for cancer, and radiation affects your retina and causes all kinds of like swelling and bleeding, and I used to photograph this stuff, and this wasn't, this was just coming from the treatment that they were having, and so those were high levels, but even low levels affect their heart, and we're going to need these kids to be as healthy as possible. And these are all good changes to make.
Right.
It's really no lose. Even if the radiation's not there, you're taking steps to be healthier. And the other thing I recommend is get rid of your TV and start getting your news from alternative sources, because you're going to get more useful information from there than you're ever going to get from mainstream.
Yeah, I did that a few months ago. I don't have that any longer.
I did too. After Fukushima, I was watching CNN endlessly and BBC trying to figure out what was going on, and they weren't talking about it. And it's like, why aren't they talking about this? This is so huge. When Chernobyl happened, I was in high school. That's all anyone talked about was Chernobyl for months and months and months. There was something very strange going on that alerted me right away when they pulled these graphs and said not to worry about it. I knew that couldn't be right.
Well, the preventive measures that we're talking about, look, everybody, if you bought yourself a box of N95 respirator masks, you went out and bought some bentonite clay and some baking soda, you're probably going to spend about $30.
Right.
Seems worth it to me.
And the other thing is, when your kids come home or you come home, especially in the winter, take off all your outerwear, especially your shoes. Don't wear that stuff in your house anymore. Leave it in the garage or leave it at your entrance, because you're tracking in particles from outside. And we know the particles are there. They're being measured. And the EPA graphs, they measure beta and gamma. They don't even measure alpha, which is the most dangerous kind. That's those hot particles that they found in air filters from cars.
Right.
Researchers started doing that right after Fukushima, and they estimated that people living in the Pacific Northwest were breathing in anywhere from 5 to 30 of these particles a day just through normal outdoor activity, walking, out of your house to get into your car and go to work. People who are jogging, working out outside where your heart rate, it goes up so you're breathing in more.
Yep.
They're getting more of a dose. You breathe in one of those particles and it causes cancer.
Yep. One particle.
What we're really going to see is an explosion of lung cancer.
That's
an
the gene pool.
Of leukemia.
Christina, it's the gene pool. That's what my doctor tells everybody. It's your genes. It's your family. It's your genes. All right, look, we have to wrap this up. Hey, I just want to say thank you. You were awesome.
Thank you.
Really
Thank you so much.
You think you might come back in a little while if we can maybe do an update? I hope we don't have to, but it seems like we probably will. You might be into that?
Absolutely.
All right. Everybody, check out Christina's Facebook page, Rad Chick. And, her YouTube account, it's Itchy.
iChica X4.
Okay, iChica X4. X4. All right,
I'll try to drop that into your chat too. I have it up in the other room.
Yeah, and I'll post them up on my pages, and it'll be up on my website too. And also, just for your reference, Christina, if you check out my website, frontradio.net, I have a live Earth and Sky Tools button there. You go to that page. I have real-time stats on everything weather and Earth related.
That's awesome. See, we like all the same things.
That's right. So sub my YouTube page, lady.
I will.
Okay. All right. All right, everybody. I'm going to wrap this up. Thank you all for hanging out. I appreciate it. Oh, by the way, I could not type in chat tonight. I don't know. Blog Talk Radio was killing me. Good night, everybody.
Your choice is simple. Join us and live in peace, or pursue your present course and face obliteration. We shall be waiting for your answer. The decision rests with you.